For this video, I thought I would have one of my hawks on the glove to discuss this particular species. And before I discuss it, I want you to listen to this little clip here. I've clipped it down a little bit. It's actually a recording of a BBC Radio 2 news bulletin, lunchtime bulletin, that I heard on the 10th of March. I was actually on the way back from doing some visits to some care homes in Scotland. I did a video on it and I had the mic in the car. And when it mentioned on the radio, I pressed record on that mic so it captured the audio. And just have a little listen to this.
Residents of a village in Hertfordshire say at least a dozen people there have been attacked by a bird of prey. Locals in Flamstead say a hawk has been seen swooping down, appearing to target tall men. Falconers from a neighbouring town say they plan to humanely trap the bird and find its owner. Lucy Atchison reports.
2 months ago, people in Flamstead began spotting what they believe to be a Harris hawk flying around the village. But over the past week, reports have surged of the bird dive-bombing people, particularly tall men. Roy Lambden was one of the latest targets and caught the incident on CCTV.
In my driveway, I was walking along and the hawk came from behind me and caught me on the top of the head, cut my head, and then I watched it fly off.
Residents are still puzzled about the bird's owner after a spokesperson from nearby Whipsnade Zoo confirmed it doesn't belong to them. The zoo has urged people not to get too close to the hawk and said their bird keepers are on standby to help if it strikes again.
So there we have it, a Harris hawk. When I first heard that about a bird swooping down, I thought it might have been a buzzard, because the common buzzard or European buzzard has been known to, in certain areas, mob people going past, especially if they're on bicycles or they're jogging. And this is because they're nesting in the trees nearby, and in those particular areas there'll be something very unique about the landscape. If someone runs or goes by on a bike, because they're moving at speed, the buzzard is mistaking that as a threat of some sort, and it's dive bombing and mobbing them and even come into contact with the top of their heads a little bit. But no, turns out it was a Harris hawk, the Mexican and American and South American and Central American bird of prey that has become very popular in all types of falconry over the last 20 years or so, and lots of people now may only ever have just a Harris hawk, and that's it, which some people believe is ruining the art of falconry, which is absolutely fine if you have that opinion. Now, I have worked with many different hawks, but now I only work with Harris hawks because of the work we do, especially as I'm sending lots of team members off to fly the birds. I need to make sure they're not ringing me all the time with problems like, oh, it's up a tree not coming down, oh, it's caught prey and I can't find it, or whatever it might be. I say that, can't find it. Obviously, we put the telemetry on, the GPS goes on the hawks, but very rare. I'm trying to think if we've ever had to use it on one of the hawks. I don't think we have, because the only time they've ever kind of gone a little bit AWOL, we know where they've gone. You just walk over and they're down the tree and they come down. I can't think we've ever had to track them, which links very well onto the topic that we're talking about here. And this is people losing Harris hawks in particular. Now, birds of prey go missing on a regular basis. People have incidents during hunting with them. People have telemetry fail. Sometimes there are wind damage in storms on enclosures. People have accidents with the handling and the grips and the knots, all sorts of different reasons, even illegal activity, people releasing birds on purpose and things like that. But the Harris hawk is one of the most common to be lost, which I find a little bit amazing because they're really hard to lose. They are highly intelligent, much easier to train than most birds of prey, and much more reliable. Now, the reason simply why there are so many out there that have been lost is because they've become so common. Now, when people say to me on a display somewhere, they'll come by, oh, we've got a neighbour who has a bird of prey. It's nearly always a Harris hawk, nearly always is. It might be a goshawk sometimes or something, but usually it's a Harris hawk. And so because there are more of them, it makes sense there's going to be more of them lost. So now what I'd like to do is comment on that news clip, and then I'm going to talk about British Harris hawks. And I know you're thinking, what you're about? I'll come on to that shortly. So why would this particular bird of prey be mobbing, really, it's what it sounds like, people in the village nearby? Well, a wild bird, a normal wild bird of prey, probably wouldn't do that unless it was nesting. And we're going to assume this bird isn't nesting or breeding at all, even though it is that time of the year, I suppose, for that to start happening. So maybe it is. We'll come on to why that could be in a moment, actually. But perhaps it's something to do with the fact that it's a captive bird that's become lost, and certain men in particular, I think it said, are getting attacked, as it were. And this may be because its trainer was a man, and it's trying to kind of get their attention to say, hey, have you got any food? Maybe checking them out. That's my theory on what's happening there. Now, the reason why it could be that it's something to do with nesting or breeding is because there are now in the UK British Harris hawks. Some are believed to have bred with the European buzzard, which I've already mentioned in this video. They are very close in DNA. I know somebody who once crossed one of these with a golden eagle, so they are very, very similar in DNA. But yeah, imagine that kind of hybrid, a buzzard that has that kind of scavengery kind of way of hunting, if you like, and also the size of it mixed with a very intelligent, aggressive bird like this. It'd be quite an interesting thing. Would we start getting lots of them and having lots of buzzards hunting in packs like these do in the wild? I don't know. Well, about 10 years ago, I used to live in a village not far from where I live now, and I used to have a big van with a big owl picture on the back that said Owl Adventures. One day I got a phone call from a neighbour in the village. I didn't know them, and they said, oh, I've seen your van. I'm just wondering, have you lost a bird of prey? I said, no, not at all. Well, there is one flying around our garden trying to get to our hens. So I went over to have a look, and even then I thought, I bet it's a Harris hawk, and it was. It was a small male, a bit like this one, and when it saw me, it screamed in that way Harris hawks do. And I thought, that's interesting. It doesn't like me. It sees me as a bit of a threat here in a way that, again, a wild bird wouldn't do. That's a sign of a lost bird of prey. And in a way, it's similar to behaviour to this one lost in, is it Herefordshire, that was mobbing people or whatever. It's behaving in a way that's not a wild bird behaviour. It's something, a bit of an anomaly that a captive bird would do once it's lost and it's surviving in the wild, say. And we'd spotted it a few more times, spotted on dead trees and things like that, but never wanted to come down. Then I had, probably about 6 months or more later, someone call me and say, oh, we've just seen that Harris hawk before, and it was flying around, and I know it was a Harris hawk because I saw the leather jesses on its legs as it was flying. And I said, that male Harris hawk didn't have anything on its legs. It may have had anklets on, but it would definitely no jesses, or flying jesses, or anything like that. So I said, this sounds different. And then I got another call a few days later. I've just seen that male again without jesses, and another slightly larger one with jesses flying with it. I said, that sounds like a female Harris. Someone else's lost bird, maybe the same person, I have no idea, now flying together. And then the following year, I noticed in a tree a Harris hawk. I walked up to this branch, I could see it quite clearly, and it very obviously had its juvenile plumage, more kind of patterned on the front there. That one was clearly the young of those two buzzards, those two hawks that had been seen in the trees on a regular basis. I remember driving past and seeing the little male sort of in the tree looking out with the female probably on eggs. So the hawk I saw, I believe, was a British born Harris hawk. Hatched in this country, therefore you could argue it's a British Harris hawk. Hunting on birds probably, mostly, but occasionally small rabbits and maybe other things as well. And then the area was farmland, plenty of rodents, plenty of rabbits, plenty of birds. Now, moving on a little bit further down the line, if you go to another 3 years on from that, someone posted a photograph of a bird of prey, quite a good close-up actually, in a tree, that was in a village a few miles down from the village I was talking about. And this bird looked rather strange. It was kind of different in its coloration. You were looking at going, it's some sort of hawk. And from what we could tell, that was a hawk, a Harris hawk / buzzard hybrid. Now, it's interesting because in falconry, we get loads of hybrid falcons, tribreds as well, all sorts of mixtures. But in the hawk world and the eagle world, it's quite a rare thing. You do sometimes see golden eagle mixed with steppes or fruginus, things like that. But it's much, much rarer. And that isn't necessarily because it's harder to do. I think it's because it's less fought after. That's not something people want necessarily. But if you look at the evidence that I've presented to you there, male lost hawk, don't know whose it belongs to, then a female's paired up with it, then you see evidence of them nesting and breeding, then I see a really young one in the tree, it must be one of their young, and then a few years later we hear of this hybrid bird. I've not seen them since then. I've not seen any of those hawks at all. I mean, the amount of times I've got calls saying, I've seen a Harris hawk, have you lost a hawk? We've seen it. I mean, I was in the Morrison's car park nearby once and saw them circling together, 2 Harris hawks just flying around. It's just unbelievable. So when it comes to reputation of falconry and that kind of thing, it really isn't great to have wild Harris hawks out there. The DEFRA and the people who deal with all the agricultural sort of laws and animals and zoos and so on, the part of the government, are looking at, and they're very slow, so nothing will happen soon, they are looking at possibly having Article 10s issued to Harris hawks, potentially, or some other kind of legislation. We're not under threat of having them kept, I think, but yes, it's not really a good thing for falconry, is it, when we have hybrids that shouldn't be out there in the wild as a result of people keeping birds of prey. Please let me know your comments below. Be really interested to hear what you think. Obviously there are people out there who aren't doing enough training on keeping something like a hawk. Even though they are much easier to train than certain other birds of prey, they're still not something you just go and get. You've got to do your research, read books, watch YouTube videos, ask for advice, get a mentor, join a falconry club, all that kind of stuff, you know, volunteer at a local bird of prey centre. Those are the right things to do. Because if you don't, there's a chance your bird will either get injured, die or be lost. Or even you could get injured as well. And we always want the right thing for our birds. Hope you found that interesting. Please do comment with your thoughts below. Let me know what you think. And as always, thank you for watching.